I didn't start out thinking I would become a teacher and be interested in simulation. I started out thinking I wanted to become a research biochemist. So I got my degrees, my master's and my PhD at Illinois and Minnesota while I was concurrently in training to become a physician. I decided I wanted to spend 1 year at Georgetown University with Dr. W. Proctor Harvey. He was the guru, if you will, of bedside diagnosis, where with your stethoscope you could diagnose just about any heart condition. And that changed my whole goal in life. I wanted then to be like him. I wanted to be a teacher. The idea of building a simulator came from my background in research, where I said, how can I become an educator? Dr. Harvey always simulated heart sounds. He went, look, ruppida, ruppida, ruppida. I said, boy, I'm going to build a machine that'll do that, and you could have the pulses and everything. So that was my stimulus. In order to make my dream into a reality, I said, where would you go to do a simulation like that? And of course I said Disney. There was no Disney in Florida, so I got in touch with the people in California, and they were very gracious, said they'd be interested. The only problem was they would own it. And I said, the university owns it, I can't do that. But they were kind enough to suggest I see someone in New York who did backstage props for Broadway shows and the Thanksgiving parade. So I went up there every Thursday morning, very early, came back every Thursday night, and I worked in Spanish Harlem, where their shop was, and we built the first Harvey. While working in the shop, there was a Time magazine, and Lyndon Johnson, our president, was Times Man of the Year. And I told him we wanted 3 different age patients to simulate. And would you believe, on the older one, they put Lyndon Johnson's face. I took them to the American Heart Association meetings. Way back in, I think it was 1968, we demonstrated them. And they were very well accepted. However, we didn't have more than one disease in each mannequin, and you couldn't move 30 mannequins into an area for teaching. So the idea came up, how will we put many diseases in one body? I didn't have the technical skills or know where I could get them. In the middle of the night, I was asked to see an elderly lady whose face was drooping, and she was in a heart rhythm disturbance called atrial fibrillation at a very rapid rate, 200. And I did what I think a medical student would do, and I gave her some intravenous digoxin. That was many years ago, and boom, her heart rate comes down to normal. She sits there and says, thank you, doctor, and no more trouble with the sagging in her face. And it turns out, I learned from telephone calls the next day, her son was the president of ITT, which was at that time one of the most effective large corporations in our country. I met Mr. Harold Janine, and he assigned me to a lovely gentleman, Stuart Flashen was his name, who then assigned me to the Nutley, New Jersey Defense Communication Division of International Telephone and Telegraph. And those engineers were crazy about this project, because all they did was build things to hurt people, defense, war, and instead they were doing something for the common good. So I had nothing but skilled help, and they devised a way to put all the diseases into one body. It was remarkable what they could do. When we finally got the multiple disease state mannequin, medical institutions were not all that interested. They said the old way was the good way, use patients, which of course is true, patients are best, but you can do so much with a simulator. But the public was interested, so ITT did a big commercial using Harvey the simulator. It was actually shown on the Super Bowl, can you imagine?
45-year-old gentleman comes to the emergency room with acute, severe, crushing chest pain and the murmur of mitral regurgitation. Now, what does it do to?
Subaortic stenosis?
You're a student doctor. Your subject? Heart disease.
Myocardial infarction, a classic heart attack.
How do you find a heart patient to study? Well, one answer is Harvey, a mannequin with a heart. Using Harvey, students can learn the signs and symptoms for more kinds of heart disease than most doctors come across in a lifetime. Doctors at the University of Miami Medical School developed this experimental mannequin. The people at ITT designed its complex circuitry. Now others are being built with the same ITT circuitry to help train tomorrow's doctors.
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1.
When you consider that heart disease is the nation's #1 killer, you can see where Harvey has quite a future.
Another example of how the public was interested is a program used to be on television called That's Incredible. And they came in and they did this whole bit that showed Harvey and how incredible it was.
165 years ago, in a dark, eerie castle, the writer Mary Shelley invented Frankenstein, the story of a man-made monster dramatically brought to life.
A less sinister modern-day counterpart was painstakingly constructed in a basement laboratory in Florida, a laboratory strewn with experiments that went wrong. The creator is a scientist, a physician, and a teacher at the University of Miami School of Medicine. It is here that Dr. Michael Gordon invented an incredible cardiac simulator, which he christened Harvey.
I guess the idea for Harvey the Simulator came about in my desire to try to take what the discipline of basic research and apply it to education. We did a major study. It showed that, in fact, students exposed to this device, when compared to those in the traditional programs of education, perform much better on patients.
Some of the doubters of Harvey did have a credible point. We needed to document that its value was great and could substitute for patients. We did certain initial studies, and then, after years of effort, we got the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute to support a study that was rigid and that was beautifully controlled. They even asked for a request for proposals for an independent evaluation. And to make a long story short, the bottom line was, when we took 100 medical students at 5 medical centers and compared them to students who were trained with just patients compared to just Harvey, would you believe that the Harvey group got more right in the cognitive or multiple choice type questions? They got more right with Harvey, but most important, and that's the bottom line, when they were given patients, they got more of them right. So the performance was excellent. I've always said that it's not the simulator that counts, it's the curriculum. So we proceeded way back 30 years ago to make a curriculum, and we made it computer-based. Computers were brand new at the time. We had to actually build a system, unlike today, that could play old discs that you had your video on and so forth. And we made an entire curriculum that matched the diseases in Harvey. People then told me, oh my gosh, you're going to make medical students impersonal, and they won't know how to treat patients. We actually did a study on that, and patients liked the medical students trained with Harvey and Umedic as much or more than they liked students trained with patients. So it didn't really matter. Simulators were valid ways to teach people. We always felt that a remarkably important component of our computer-based training was to have a real doctor there teaching and demonstrating. So I would, as part of the Umedic program, be there listening, going, look, and by doing that, instead of reaching a class of 20 medical students, and by taping it and distributing these, we reached thousands and thousands of learners, of medical students, nurses, physician assistants. They all use these, and by using the technology, we distributed to each and every one of those people. For years, we had focused on cardiology. I'm a cardiologist. And then the dean called me one day, he's my boss, said he'd like us to take over the training for advanced cardiac life support. Well, it is cardiac, but it led me in a new path, emergency medicine. We took over the training of ACLS, Advanced Cardiac Life Support, for all the medical students, because it was a new requirement for graduation. And I wasn't sure that it was the greatest thing in the world that we had to take the time. Was I wrong? Within a week, the city of Miami, Metro-Dade County, all kinds of places called, could they be trained with us as well? And that led to a very large emergency medicine program. Even the medical directors of the paramedic firefighters said that we shouldn't be training them in too many areas. It's scoop and run, scoop up the patient, run to the hospital. But we didn't believe in that. So we trained paramedic firefighters to recognize the symptoms of heart attack, to treat them, to take electrocardiograms, transmit them to the emergency department, and the same for stroke. You know, we believed in this team approach way before anyone else did. I was actually asked many years ago to vote at one of the hospitals, would we allow nurses, would you believe that, to resuscitate the patient? I'd much rather have them resuscitate the patient if they're knowledgeable and trained than doctors who don't do it very often. So, of course, yes, and that's standard today. We felt from the beginning that we didn't want to make this my show or just the University of Miami's. We wanted it to be broad-based and have input from others. So I invited, way back when, 40 years ago, some of my colleagues from the Mayo Clinic, from Emory University, one went to Arizona, and so on. And we came together and met several times per year to develop the curriculum, because the curriculum is everything. And the net result is wide acceptance. I mean, several thousand institutions, medical centers, agencies worldwide use the products we've developed. And that success is because of the input and broad base we've developed. It's one of the things which people should remember as they go into these programs. Obviously, you also need facilities. When we started out, I was in a small office. Harvey was my roommate. And then I applied for space at the university. I was approved by the committee, but they said, unfortunately, there's no space available. I told this story to a patient of mine who happened to be the head veterinarian at our medical school. And he said, well, I've got a room in the back of the dog lab. So we used to go through that dog area with them all barking and everything to a room that was given to us. And that's where we experimented and worked further on the multiple disease state Harvey. It was terrific. It was terrific. When we outgrew my office, we then said we need something really proper, especially by then we were training all these paramedic firefighters and so many students coming in from around the state, visitors from other states and countries. So we got a piece of land, last one actually left on the medical campus, and we built ourselves what we call the Medical Training and Simulation Laboratory. And it was terrific. And then the dean contacted me and said, yes, you can have more space if you'd like it, but we're tearing down your building. So they tore it down, but thankfully they gave us a brand new space in a brand new building. So we have 34,000 square foot of state-of-the-art with everything you can imagine, proper offices, proper simulation facilities, in a brand new 15-story building. So we're very happy about that. And we did all this through fundraising, particularly through patients. One of the stimuli for me to recognize that money was very important was the fact I called one of the very early pioneers, Dr. Steve Abramson in California, and he had started out making an anesthesiology simulator. And he was at his wit's end because he couldn't raise enough money to continue his project. So I learned that lesson and I made that a priority, and it worked out for me. Anyone interested in simulation, or for that matter, any innovative new way of educating medically, there's three things that I would suggest you keep in mind at all times. One is you need the funds. In each institution, it's different. If you're a clinician, patients. The dean must love you, so make sure you work on that as another example. The second thing you need after funds is you can go further if you go together. You can go faster if you go alone. You want to go further. So embrace your colleagues, get them interested, get a consensus, and they'll work with you, and that will open doors and make your curriculum even better. And the third thing, as you've heard before, but everything comes down to perseverance. It really does. There's no such thing as failure at all. It never happens. You're in a maze, you bounce off one wall, you go another direction, you win because you care enough to stay with the program. I want to thank all of you who are here for making my dreams come true. There was a time when I felt like I was a used car salesman for simulation, and today there's been global acceptance. And it's only going to continue through the legacy that you people carry out by doing the very best job you can, because you are saving lives. You are saving lives, and I thank you for what you do every day.